Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of the Arsenal News Show, joining you every morning at 8 a.m. UK time. Hope you're doing good. Hope you're doing well. Thank you so much, as always, for making this a part of your morning routines. It's Thursday. We are nearly at the end of our weekdays of the first week of the international break. We can finally start, hopefully soon, looking ahead and previewing Arsenal's game against Leeds, but we're probably still about a week away from that. But if we remain patient, that game will come. So let's just keep ourselves as happy as we can whilst there is no real football around at the moment. By real football, I mean, of course, our club, the international games just do not give me that same, it just doesn't give me that same feel. Whilst I support England, and I'm sure people listening support their nations all around the world, I just can't get into qualifiers. I just can't. Thankfully, the Women's Champions League was able to provide some, what's the word I'm looking for? I suppose respite, because it wasn't able to fulfill it entirely because I was reminded of how bad VAR is. But the girls will come back to North London soon and hopefully be able to turn over Bayern and progress through to the semi-finals of the Champions League. Good morning to those joining us in the chat box. Matt G, I miss Arsenal, absolutely. Paul, good morning to you, to Blackshine, to Vivian, to Johnny, Amira, PJ, Mr. E, Marcus, Mike, Olu, Stephen. We've got Blackshine, we've got Carl, Alpha, Dave joining us in the chat. 4 a.m. in my in NYC big match, TGT versus Sleep. TGT wins. I'm glad that's the case, Dave. Thank you so much for maintaining your level of consciousness for us. Let's jump into today's stories. Of course, we'll go to your chat box and some questions in part 2. Zubimendi, Martin Zubimendi, Real Sociedad midfielder, has been speaking to the media after being called up by Spain to talk about why he ended up staying in northern Spain, in San Sebastian, for the rest, at least, of this season. He says, when asked about supposed interest from Arsenal in January, he said, "They're rumours because I told my agent that I didn't want to hear anything, especially in winter. Leaving Real Sociedad aside, with the season we are having, would be illogical. I am very happy here," he told Sports. So he's a player that Arsenal are seriously interested in, a player that they like and that they would consider potentially for the future. 24 years of age now, Spanish full international, has made his debut for the Spanish senior national side. But how he'll get on under De La Fuente, we'll have to wait and see. He is seen as the most likely long-term kind of replacement for Sergio Busquets. Rodri, of course, still in the team, and he'll be fighting with him for that position and for the deep part of the midfield. But he's a very good player, and Arsenal have a right to be interested in him. And we'll see if this one furthers itself by the summer and if it changes and if Arsenal still are interested in the Spanish international. Arsenal has said, according to The Athletic, to be amongst a number of clubs interested in signing Mohamed Kudus, the Ghanaian international, currently playing and plying his trade in Ajax in Amsterdam, in the Netherlands, in the Eredivisie. Has been linked with a number of clubs and impressed at the World Cup for Ghana. He, of course, is a teammate of Thomas Partey, who has always been very complimentary of his young teammate. Can play in a number of attacking positions, including the left, the right, through the middle, and as a second striker or attacking midfielder. Very versatile player and would be an asset to any team that he joins. I still, for one, can't kind of make sense of Arsenal fitting him into the team, and we've been linked to him before, and I suppose this is just one of those that's cropping up once again, with The Athletic now talking about it this time. But he's a very good player, and certainly I'm sure if Arteta wants him, he's got a reason for finding a place in the squad for him. Now, off of transfer news and more on to Arsenal, Ethan Nwaneri scored twice for England's under-17s against Denmark as they went on to win 3-1. He picked up an assist in the game as well. It is a very difficult period for Arsenal and Ethan Nwaneri because, of course, we still don't know whether or not the youngster would indeed be committing his future to Arsenal. Manchester City, Liverpool, Chelsea, and a number of other clubs are all interested in the youngster, who became the youngest Premier League player ever when he made his debut in that match against Brentford coming off the bench. Arsenal have done everything they can to try and keep Ethan Nwaneri at the club by giving him opportunities, not only at that youth level, not only in those mid-season and pre-season periods, but also by using him in a genuine Premier League fixture from the bench and putting him ahead of plenty of other exciting young talent to make that debut as well. Arsenal have done everything. However, if there are better offers from elsewhere, there is probably going to be very little Arsenal can do, and only can hope that he will continue to keep faith in the team that have provided that opportunity and development to him throughout his younger years. Now, speaking of Arsenal Hale graduates, Folarin Balogun has been spotted in the US as talks over his international future are set to take place. Balogun was, of course, snubbed by Gareth Southgate in his latest call-up of forwards to the England national team, instead taking the likes of Harry Kane, Ivan Toney, etc., which seems on the surface maybe a little bit unfair, considering his record for Reims this season has been absolutely brilliant. He's closing in on Glenn Hoddle's record as an Englishman playing in France, and I think he's only one goal away actually from matching that record. We'll see if he's able to break that in the final 10 or so games of the season. Balogun was spotted in the US, in Orlando. Lots of, I assume, maybe Arsenal-related US fans were kind of looking across where this was, using their transfer tactics of looking on Google Maps and looking on Street View to try and work out where he was. But they've managed to identify him as being in Orlando. The expectation I've heard is that there's set to be meetings, there's set to be some discussions. Whether or not a decision will be made over that future in these next kind of week or so, we'll have to wait and see. There are suggestions that from a couple of people I've spoken to that they feel it would be quite a rushed decision if it happens now, and that he's still got plenty of time to make up his mind. He could finish the season, he could have his summer. There's plenty of time before the next World Cup, of course, which is when the US would be targeted to try and include him as their main number 9 for that tournament. But yeah, there's plenty of time for him to still make up that decision. And whether or not he wants to wait and see whether an England chance does crop up. Of course, he's never ruled out playing for Nigeria either. He's got heritage there and family there, and he's never ruled out that he wouldn't play for Nigeria either. But both, he considers England his home, he says. But of course, there's plenty of family that live in New York, and I believe he was actually born in New York as well. So he's got his links there. Let's see what happens, and we'll keep you updated with everything that goes on in this Balogun story. But it's a very interesting one. I would not begrudge him at all if he decided to represent the US after being snubbed again by Gareth Southgate. Now, our headline story, and the biggest news of yesterday in the Arsenal world, arguably, was the retirement of Mesut Ozil, the former Arsenal midfielder and German international. Left a lengthy message on social media, which read, "Hello, everyone. After thoughtful consideration, I'm announcing my immediate retirement from professional football. I've had the privilege to be a professional footballer for almost 17 years now, and I feel incredibly thankful for the opportunity. But in recent weeks and months, having also suffered some injuries, it's become more and more clear that it's time to leave the big stage of football. It has been an amazing journey filled with unforgettable moments and emotions. I want to thank my clubs, Schalke, Werder Bremen, Real Madrid, Arsenal, Fenerbahce, Başakşehir, and coaches who supported me, plus teammates who have become friends. Special thanks must go to my family members and my closest friends. They have been a part of my journey from day one and have given me so much love and support through the good times and the bad. Thank you for all of my fans who have shown me so much love, no matter the circumstances and no matter which club I was representing. Now I'm looking forward to everything that is in front of me with my beautiful wife, Amin, and my 2 beautiful daughters, Ada and Ella. But you can be sure that you will hear from me from time to time on my social media channels. See you soon." Mesut posted with a picture of him in a Real Madrid shirt with alongside his personal logo as well in the top right-hand corner. When a player retires, you do look back on, for me, the good things more than the bad things. And certainly in that moment, I was watching back clips of some of the goals that Mesut Ozil had scored, some of the assists, the Ozil chip, as it was kind of become known, the little stab, the little bump in the ball that he manages to chip over keepers and players as he passes or shoots. He has been obviously a player with amazing talent and some of the greatest ability on the ball that the game has potentially ever seen. And despite, of course, the friction between him and Arsenal, be it with Unai Emery, be it with Mikel Arteta, I do look at Mesut Ozil as a necessary part of Arsenal's journey to where it is now. I don't personally consider him an Arsenal legend. I certainly consider him one of the best footballers that Arsenal ever had on their books. I don't necessarily think with the story of Ozil that I would consider him a legend in the same way I consider other players legends, and it's sometimes a phrase I think that's thrown around far too easy. He's arguably a legend of the game, of course, winning a World Cup, winning of plenty of trophies, of course, with Real Madrid and with Arsenal. But I think that what Arsenal, and I wrote about this yesterday in my piece related to Ozil's retirement, I actually think that maybe Arsenal wouldn't be where they are now if it wasn't for Mesut Ozil in some circumstances. I think that certainly the period that Unai Emery had and the period that Mikel Arteta had with Ozil provided a lesson. It provided experience. It provided Arteta in particular, I think, with the understanding and the change that he needed to go through. Arteta and Ozil were teammates, of course, first of all. And when he rejoined Arsenal, there were very few players that Arteta played with that were still at the club. If you think about it, you had Callum Chambers, I believe, was still here. You had Rob Holding at that time as well. And Mesut Ozil was one of those players that he played with. And from day one, that relationship that was probably more friendly when they were teammates stopped. And whilst there was certainly a respect between the two, Arteta came in as the manager, and there were issues. Whilst he certainly used Ozil in his early teams up until the pandemic, a period that he believed, obviously, he described as being for footballing reasons, decided to then leave him out of the group. And I think it's an experience that will certainly have enabled us, Arteta, to learn what he wanted from that number 10, what he wanted from that creative player. And I think that Ozil actually led to Arsenal getting Martin Odegaard and understanding what Arsenal under Arteta wanted from that number 10 player. And despite all of his ability, despite all of his brilliance and, you know, the vision and the execution of his passing and what he could see that other people couldn't, Arteta wanted something different from a number 10. And to be honest, not even a number 10. I think Arteta wanted to move away from that out-and-out number 10 role and more into what the position Martin Odegaard plays in now. I remember writing an article at the start of last season as one of my first pieces I wrote for Football London, which was all about why Arsenal and Arteta had moved from Ozil to Odegaard. Now, one of the things that Ozil certainly collected during his time as a player is a significant following, I think, of people that are very, very passionately supportive of Ozil. And sometimes that passion, I think, grew into places that weren't particularly great. In reaction to writing that article, I received probably the most abuse I've ever received when discussing a player and when discussing not even too critically a player, but just an idea around an article around Martin Odegaard and why he was the man to kind of succeed Ozil and why he could bring the things to the Arsenal team for the future that Ozil unfortunately couldn't. And I remember getting so much abuse from people that were obviously very diehard Ozil fans. And I think it was a lesson, not to me, but I think a lesson to, perhaps to me in a sense of not being careful about what I write, but understanding that if you are critical of certain players, if you're critical of their footballing ability alone, which is all that the article was about, you will certainly face certain backlash. I think I wouldn't describe it as a humbling experience. I would describe it as a learning experience. And it certainly did never change the way in which I approach criticisms of players. And it certainly changed the way I thought that I was certainly right to write the piece around how Odegaard is the player for the future. And 2 years later, nearly 2 years later, 18 months or so later, I have to say I feel justified in the piece that I wrote around Odegaard being the man to take on the mantle of Arsenal's creative force in the team for the good, now club captain, and I think embodies everything that Mikel Arteta wants from a player on the pitch. That said, Mesut Ozil will always be, in my mind, a player that ended Arsenal's trophy drought, a player that was signed in a real moment of excitement back in 2013. I will never forget those Sky Sports deadline day pictures when we signed him. Was it, I can't remember was it Garrett Hughes? I think maybe the Sky Sports reporter was, that was on the scenes at the Emirates, seeing those arguably scenes that started Sky Sports reporters being closed off to the public and inside the ground because the Arsenal fans certainly lost their minds around the reporter. There were other incidents outside of just that, of course, that I think led to Sky Sports reporters suddenly being in areas where they're more protected and not surrounded by fans. But he came in. I remember the assists. I think it's for Olivier Giroud on his debut at Sunderland, playing in that yellow and blue kit. I remember, of course, his contributions that season, which led to an FA Cup win against Hull City. And, of course, the following year, in a win against Aston Villa in that 4-0 victory, Alexis Sanchez with that brilliant strike. I'll also never forget the line from Alan Davies on the Tuesday Club podcast, which I included in my article yesterday, which was that Ozil, when he picks up a medal at the end of every season, it's just what he thinks is normal, because Arsenal didn't really have those types at the club, players that had won loads, players that have won plenty of things and brought in that mentality of, no, at the end of every season, you are supposed to win a trophy. And he certainly instilled that in the group and went to pick up 3, arguably 4. He never played in that 2020 FA Cup final, but on his Wikipedia page, it still comes up under his honours as having won that, I assume because he played in the earlier rounds of that competition. But he was not available and was not called up by Mikel Arteta for the FA Cup final in 2020. But he certainly won 3, goes down as with records of assists in seasons across his time at the club. And certainly Mesut Ozil will be a player that will live long in the memories of plenty of Arsenal fans. Okay, before we move on, we need to talk about, of course, the man that gave Mesut Ozil his chance at Arsenal, which was Arsene Wenger, and you can win a signed Arsene Wenger Arsenal shirt, which has been framed for display as well. Tickets are available on Football Prizes, the link down in the description if you want to get involved. 84 tickets have so far been sold, so plenty more opportunities for you. And if there is indeed a low amount of tickets sold, it gives you a better chance of winning. You can also, just by buying a ticket, win a signed and framed, not framed, but signed Freddie Ljungberg Arsenal shirt, a Patrick Vieira signed and custom framed Arsenal photo montage, and a custom signed and framed Jens Lehmann photo montage, as well as plenty of Football Prizes site credit. Right, let's move to part 2 and your questions right after this. Of course, you can also get your hands on some TGT non-profit merch. All of the money and the proceeds of this that would have been made go to the local business that supports this, plus Cancer Macmillan Support and the Arsenal Foundation. Thank you continually for those of you that are sporting your TGT home and away logos and helping support some great charities. Let's go to the chat box then and tackle some of your questions before we wrap up today's show. Gaik says, sorry if I pronounced that incorrectly. If Arsenal sell everyone expecting them to sell, why couldn't they afford a bid for Bellingham? The expectation is around the wages. He's expected to earn upwards of 250 to 300,000 pounds per week, is what certain circles seem to think. If that isn't the case, and he was available for around the 200,000 pound per week figure, I don't think there is an argument to suggest that Arsenal would not be in the race potentially to try and sign him. But if the wages demands are around the £300,000 per week figure, it would not make too much sense for Arsenal to break their wage structure for Bellingham. No matter how good the player is, the dynamic of the group is really important to maintain, and that's why Arsenal wouldn't break their transfer record and wage record for Bellingham. Record in terms of what the existing players are on, of course, with Aubameyang and Ozil on significantly higher than £300,000 per week, something which didn't particularly go too well for Arsenal. Matt says, how do you get through the international break? International football is so boring. I mean, this might come out bluntly, but you have more in your life. You need more in your life than just football, Matt. I mean, I work football 24/7, basically, talking about it every morning, writing about it all through the day. But you need to have more things in your life as well. I'm going to go play golf today. I'm very excited about that. I'm going to play it again on Sunday, see family and friends. You know, you've got to expand your horizons beyond the one sport. Get yourself out there. Play some games, do some gaming if you're into that. Learn a new skill. It's like being back in lockdown again, isn't it? But yeah, Matt, you need to expand your horizons beyond football. So Nicholas says, Tom, can you ask everyone if they're still getting notifications for the channel? I've turned the bell on, but it stopped giving me those notifications. Again, something that I'm completely out of control on, I'm afraid. I'm sure there are people that aren't, unfortunately, getting those notifications. YouTube, for some reason, decides sometimes to notify you and sometimes it doesn't. What I would say to you is that this show is on at the same time every single day. So you don't even need to turn your notifications on. What you could do is on your phone or your mobile device, just set an alarm 5 minutes before 8 a.m. UK time. And then you're ready and raring to tune in to the show. Of course, our evening shows are less consistent, but always 8 a.m. UK time every morning. So there we go. Yomi says, can we blame Ozil's downfall on Wenger? He failed to sign a proper striker in DM. He was busy shopping in Poundland when he had prime Ozil. I think Ozil was, unfortunately, a slight victim of not having the players around him at Arsenal that maybe could have accentuated his talents. But at the end of the day, I do think that Ozil internally, his own game diminished, his own game dropped off. And when we had some of the, when we brought in Aubameyang, when we had Lacazette, that's two brilliant forwards that you've got there, brilliant to a degree. And we couldn't yet, generate that level. What I always felt that we lacked behind Ozil was that Thomas Partey figure, was that Patrick Vieira figure. If we'd have brought in someone to bring in that connection between the back four and the attacking midfield, I think Ozil would have arguably have been even better. I think Olivier Giroud was a good striker. I don't think he was a brilliant striker, and I think maybe that did let him down slightly. But yeah, I think two players around Ozil, a DM that was brilliant, a forward that was brilliant, and maybe we would have seen even more from the player as well. But that never happened. Mohammed says, hi, Tom. Want to say Ramadan Kareem for all of our Muslim brothers in Palestine and all around the world as well, to celebrate the holy month of Ramadan starting today. If you are celebrating, enjoy. I hope you have a fantastic time. Marcus says, can you go on a rant about what criteria is necessarily kind of needed to become a club legend? No, Marcus, I don't need to go on a rant, because for me, legendary status is completely subject to your own appreciation for what a legend is. It's subjective. It's down to you. You can't be told that someone is not a legend in your opinion. I can tell you that I think somebody is a legend, or I think somebody isn't a legend in my opinion, but I'm not going to turn around and say you're wrong for thinking that person's a legend. I might tell you that I don't think that's the case, but a legendary status is something that is completely subjective to you. And only you can decide that. I personally don't think Ozil is. I personally think there are only a couple of examples of Emirates era legends, which may extend significantly after this season. We'll have to wait and see. But Santi Cazorla and Aaron Ramsey are my two Emirates era legends. Those two come down for me. They're players that were great servants to the club. Yes, I know there's arguments about the way in which Aaron Ramsey left. To my understanding, a contract offer that was there, unfortunately, was removed towards the end of his time at Arsenal. That changed. I'm not sure around the details of why that happened or what really went on, but I think that does affect things. Santi is just, in my opinion, one of the best footballers to ever. And I know Ozil's ability is amazing, but Santi was just one of the best footballers ever that I've ever watched. And the reason why Ramsey for me is obviously he scores 2 goals in 2 cup finals. And that's big. That's really, really big. Alexis Sanchez, for everything that I loved about him, moving to Manchester United in the way that he did, absolutely put a stain on Alexis Sanchez, unfortunately. But I forget about that and I focus on what Alexis Sanchez did as a player in the Emirates, and by far one of my favourites to ever play for Arsenal. But yeah, a real shame about how things ended. Let's go to some more. Lots of discussions about legends. If you are watching on catch up, let us know down below who your Emirates era legends are and your clarification and categorization reasons as to why they are indeed legends. Trevor says, I'm a legend. My grandchildren tell me. I'm sure you are, Trevor. Gooner Mark says, I'm a legend. It's written on my lunchbox. Well, there you go. I mean, do you ever need any more reasoning than that it's written on your lunchbox? That's all you need, arguably. Christopher says, Tom, are you a legend? I don't know who's calling me a legend, mate. I'm certainly not arrogant enough to say that myself, other than when I've had a few beers, maybe. Dave says, there is definitely the way you leave element regarding legendary status. I do agree. I think that certainly comes into things regarding the legendary status about how you leave the club and how you are when you leave the club. Yeah, that certainly comes into things. Lenny says, for me, Ozil was overrated. 2 good seasons, went missing in big games, and a good cup player. More hype than performance. Again, you're going to find people with varying views on Ozil, which is completely fair enough. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. Afsar says, who plays right back if Ben White gets injured? Great question. Afsar, at the moment, it's very, very difficult to know the answer to that question. What we saw happen against Crystal Palace was Jorginho came on and Thomas Partey went to right back, which was a very interesting move. I don't know what would be better. If you think about it, Thomas Partey at right back, Jorginho in midfield, or Thomas Partey in midfield and Rule Waters or a youth option at right back, who is the number one option. I think if you are to play a youth player at right back, it would be Rule Waters. Now, immediately people go, well, you play the right back, you play the youth option. I think we very quickly misunderstand the gap between youth football and um, and the senior level. It is very different. And I'm telling you for now, no matter what we saw of Raw Waters in pre-season and the Nuremberg game, and I think he might have played against Everton, I'm sorry, but it doesn't work. Now, for me, my option for right back is William Saliba. William Saliba, for me, is the obvious choice at right back. A, because he's played there before. He played there for Marseille on a couple of occasions. B, because we've got Rob Holding who can come in and provide cover in that position. And three, it wouldn't be Nelson because defensively you need to have someone that's more stylistically similar to White because of Zinchenko on the left-hand side. If it was Nelson you were going to put there, I think you have to play Kieran Tierney, because I just think that it would leave you far too exposed to put Nelson at right back. For me, it would be William Saliba to go at right back, and it would be Rob Holding to go at right centre back. That would be how I would manage the situation, and I think that would be the one that would make the most sense. So my back four, if Ben White gets injured, is Saliba, Holding, Gabriel, and Zinchenko. That's my back four. I think that makes the most sense because I think playing Nelson in that position is far, far too vulnerable and would leave us far, far too exposed in that area, unfortunately. Starboy Saka has played right back, yes, but I'm not taking him away from right wing. I think that's the thing. And, a lot of people suggest, well, why don't we move Zinchenko into midfield? I think it's certainly something that we can consider, but I don't think it's necessarily something that we consider at the moment with Tierney at left back. It's something you'd consider if you had Tomiyasu maybe at left back, you would then play Zinchenko in midfield. But I just think it's too offensive-minded to put Tierney and Zinchenko in the same team right now. Other than if you're bringing on Tierney to kind of close out a game ahead of Zinchenko, that's really the only time that I would think about it. Ethan says, are there any Emirates era players that you would love to have in this season's team so they have a chance to win a Premier League title? It's a great question, and thank you so much for the kind donation. Again, I always come back to Santi Cazorla. I think Santi Cazorla playing, where Granit Xhaka is now, or even playing where Martin Odegaard is now, those two positions, I think Santi would have provided great support to, great elements to. I know I speak to a lot of Arsenal fans that feel that Aaron Ramsey would absolutely flourish in this current Arsenal team, playing probably where Granit Xhaka is right now, or playing where Ramsey is, Odegaard is again. I think that would be great. I think obviously seeing Alexis Sanchez in this Arsenal team would have been a joy to behold during his prime years. So yeah, there are. Weirdly, by Bakary Sagna. I suppose Bakary Sagna is one of those players I look at and go, does he reach into kind of that legendary status? He did move to Manchester City, and I know there was a few things around the whole move to Man City that people didn't necessarily like. But I really like Bakary Sagna. I don't begrudge him for that move in the same way that I do Nasri or Adebayor or Clichy to a lesser extent. I think that Bakary Sagna is arguably someone that I look at very fondly from his time at the club and was very unfortunate for not potentially winning that. People say Fabregas. I suppose we can talk about Fabregas in the Emirates here, even though he obviously came through originally at Highbury. But Fabregas in this Arsenal team, obviously, again, another player that would be brilliant. Jenkinson, says Akmal. What a legend. Carl Jenkinson, the boy. Dan says, Tom, would you call every starter in the Invincible season legends? If so, if we win the league, are all of our starters legends? Obviously, a lot of those starters, Dan, were at the club in a period where we won other things. Obviously, some of them weren't. But it's very difficult for invincible status to not make you legendary. Obviously, what we do this season would certainly be an achievement that I think doesn't rival the Invincibles, but certainly is kind of second to the Invincibles. I don't necessarily look at the other league seasons, even 89 necessarily, which I thought was an amazing end. Obviously, I'm alive during this period, which makes it much more attached to me than what 89 was, even though it was amazing. And beating that Liverpool side was such a big achievement. But I just think that this is arguably even harder this season of winning a title, considering the teams that are around, the money's available, even the teams in the bottom half of the table and how good they are these days. I think that this, if we were to win the league this season, touch wood, that it would be second only to the Invincibles. But I think that there's a lot of players in that Invincibles team, Dan, that get legendary status because they are an Invincible, and also from some of the things they did prior and post that that Invincible season. But I think that we might need to wait a bit before we start talking about legends. It's difficult to become a legend when you're in your early 20s at a club, but I think certainly it goes a long way for that legendary status to be earned later on in their careers. That's probably the way that I would look at it. Ginger Gooner says, like you always say, though, Arteta doesn't like to make multiple changes to replace one player, so why not just put Holding at right back? I think that would be a horrible idea with respect. I just don't think Holding's got the movement. I think if you put Holding at right-sided centre-back, it limits the amount of movement that he has to engage in. If you think about Holding in a right-back position, if he's caught and has to run back, he's never getting there. He's deeper in that right-sided centre-back position. Yes, I know he jumps and dives in for tackles, and that leaves us sometimes exposed. But I think Saliba, being the more mobile player, the greater player with his speed and pace on the right, would be better. So yes, for me, Saliba right back is the way forwards in that sense. Okay, we're going to wrap things up there. Let us know down in the comment section. Answer to 2 questions. A, what makes a legend for you at Arsenal? And B, if Ben White was to be injured, which was a fantastic question put in earlier in our chat box, I think by Afsar, then do let us know in the chat box down below who it would be that you would choose and how would you structure an Arsenal team without Ben White in it. For me, as I've said before, it's Ben White. Ben White would be out. Saliba comes into that right-back position. Rob Holding right centre-back. I think that's the way to move forwards. Thank you, everybody that's been listening in today's show. Always appreciate your time. Always a joy to speak with you. Do drop a like on the video, of course. Subscribe to the channel if you are new around here. We do these every single day at 8 a.m. UK time. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday. I'm actually going to be live in half an hour over on Deluded Gooner's channel, DG, so make sure you join us. DG. What it makes me think of when I go on his channel is his intro. So do make sure you join us over on DG's channel in just under half an hour's time. And yeah, I might even be on with Sophie a little bit later on this evening as well. So plenty to come. Have a fantastic day. See you soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.